The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew-covered grass. The first rays of sunlight painted the rolling hills in gold. Beneath the great mulberry tree, Grandfather Liang sat on a wooden bench, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. At his feet, his grandson, Wei, sat cross-legged, his eyes full of curiosity. "Grandfather," Wei asked, "how do we know if something is good or bad? Sometimes, when I lose, I feel unlucky, but other times, something good comes after. How do we know?" Grandfather Liang smiled, his eyes crinkling like the folds of an old scroll. He took a slow sip of tea, then set the cup down. "Ah, Wei," he murmured, "this is a question as old as the mountains. My own grandfather once told me a story when I was your age. Perhaps now it is time I share it with you. Listen closely. Long ago, in a small village much like ours, there lived a humble farmer. He had a single horse, a strong and beautiful creature that helped him plow the fields. One day, the horse broke free and ran away into the hills. The neighbors gathered, shaking their heads. "What terrible misfortune!" they cried. But the farmer, stroking his beard, simply said, "Maybe, maybe not." A few days later, the horse returned, but it was not alone. It had brought back a group of wild horses from the mountains. The villagers gasped, "What wonderful luck! Now you are rich in horses." Again, the farmer only smiled and said, "Maybe, maybe not." The farmer's only son, eager to tame one of the wild horses, climbed atop it. But the horse was untamed and fierce. It bucked violently, throwing the boy to the ground. His legs snapped like a dry twig. The villagers gathered once more, their faces full of pity. "Oh, what a tragedy! Your poor son will not be able to work the fields." "And yet," the farmer simply said, "maybe, maybe not." Weeks later, soldiers came riding through the village, their banners high and their swords gleaming. A war had begun, and they were conscripting all young men to fight. But when they saw the farmer's son with his broken leg, they left him behind. The villagers, wiping their brows in relief, exclaimed, "How lucky you are! Your son has been spared." But the farmer only nodded and said, "Maybe, maybe not." Grandfather Liang paused, letting the weight of the story settle in the morning air. The sun had climbed higher, warming the earth, and birds flitted from branch to branch above them. Wei frowned, his young mind turning the story over like a smooth stone in his hand. So, was the farmer lucky or unlucky? He finally asked. Grandfather chuckled, his voice deep and warm. "Ah, Wei, that is the secret. Who can say? What seems bad today may be the very thing that saves us tomorrow, and what seems like fortune may lead to hardship. The river does not fight the rocks. It flows around them. Life is the same. We must flow, not resist." Wei thought for a long moment. "So, we should not worry so much about good or bad?" Grandfather Liang nodded. "Exactly. We do our best, but we do not cling to outcomes. Just as the farmer did, we simply say, maybe, maybe not." A breeze whispered through the mulberry leaves. Wei looked up at his grandfather, his heart lighter, his mind clearer. Grandfather Liang patted Wei's shoulder. "One day, my boy, you will tell this story to your own children, and when you do, you will understand it even more." Wei smiled, feeling the wisdom settle in his bones, like the roots of the old mulberry tree. The morning light shimmered through the leaves, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of a horse's hooves echoed across the hills.